That explosive reaction is what we call a trigger. And in my experience, it is almost never about your kid's actual behavior. The first practical step I want you to take is nothing. Hello, and welcome back to Talking Teens Official. I'm Nural, and thank you for joining me and for your listening ears. This is the start of season 3. I can't believe that I've actually published 20 episodes so far for season 1 and season 2. This one makes 21. The overarching theme for this season is the inner world of a teen, a parent's guide to what's really going on. But for this one, I'm going to take you deep down on a journey, and a deep down on a journey starting with yourself. We are going to be focusing on communication, connection, and tools that you can actually use in this season. And to kick things off, we are going to look at your triggers as a parent. When we say your kid or your teenager is pushing your buttons, what are we actually talking about? We're talking about that moment they get a reaction from you that you're not entirely proud of. You know the one. When they say or do something and something just clicks in your head, and it's like they've ignited the kindling right under your feet. And before you know it, you're reacting with a hot head. You yell, they react back, and the cycle just keeps on spinning around and around and around until you finally see their face drop or the tears start welling up in their eyes. It's only then that you realize what's happened, and then you start to back off, filled with regret. That explosive reaction is what we call a trigger. And in my experience, it is almost never about your kid's actual behavior. Some of the times anyway. It's usually about one of 4 deeper things. And this is where I'm going to want you to start thinking a little bit deeper about yourself. The first is what I call the ghost of your past. Sometimes it's because you're seeing something in them that a parent, your parent, or a sibling, your brother or your sister, or even maybe an old teacher did to you that you actually hated. Their dismissive tone isn't just rude. It's the same tone your father used that made you feel small. Their action isn't just about them. It's reopening an old wound, and you're reacting to a ghost from the past. The second one I want you to start thinking about is possibly, is it a mirror of yourself? Sometimes your teen is just reflecting a trait that you dislike about yourself, but you haven't admitted it to yourself yet. Their procrastination is your procrastination. Their messy room is your messy mind. It's a projection, and you're reacting to yourself, not always to them. The third, and this is the big one, this is the control switch. This is when your teen's defiance or their refusal to do what you ask them to do is actually just annoying, or it's not just annoying, I should say, and makes you feel a complete lack of control, which is deeply uncomfortable for you. It is almost primal. It's a feeling that a parent doesn't actually want to admit the fact that they've lost control. Your anger isn't about the rubbish that needs to be taken out. It's a reaction to the feeling of powerlessness and not being heard. And the fourth one is probably my fun one, and it's them just poking the bear. And let's be honest, they're just doing it because they find your reaction funny. They are intentionally poking the bear just to see what happens. It's an annoying but sometimes lovable way to test the boundaries and to actually get a reaction out of you, and you're playing right into their hands. So let's take a common trigger that I'm sure is familiar in a lot of households. Your tone of voice. Imagine this scene. You've had a long day and you're trying to get dinner ready. You're in the kitchen and you ask your teenage daughter for a simple, reasonable question. It could be a son as well. Hey, can you please take the rubbish out before the truck comes out tonight or tomorrow? And in response, you get that classic dismissive tone. Whatever. All right. okay, I'll do it. But the rubbish still sits there, accompanied by a slight eye roll, whatever. And your kids are just totally ignoring you. They're looking at their phone or just doing whatever it is that they're doing. And then you explode. It's a disproportionate wave of anger, and you might yell, "Don't you dare speak to me with that tone. What is your problem?" And suddenly you're in a huge fight over a small comment. That explosion is the trigger going off in you. But what might really be happening? This is where I want to take you through those 4 scenarios that I spoke about. So first of all, let's have a look at this situation where you've asked your kid to put the rubbish out and they've gone, okay, whatever, but they haven't done it. If we look at that through the lens of the ghost of your past, what if when you were a kid and your own parent used that exact dismissive tone to shut you down whenever you tried to express an opinion or ask for something? If you weren't feeling you were being heard and it made you feel small, in that moment, your kid isn't just a teenager who's always been rude. She's just a ghost of your past. She is channeling that voice of your parents, and you're not reacting to her. You are reacting to the decades-old feeling of being dismissed, unheard, and invalidated. Your anger can sometimes be a complete 20-year-old echo, not just a reaction to a kid who doesn't want to or can't be bothered to do the chore and help out around the house. And sometimes they can't be bothered, I'll be honest. Now, let's look at this through the second lens, the mirror of yourself. What if, and be honest with yourself with this one, what if you have a habit of using a similar dismissive, passive, aggressive tone with your own spouse or even with your own kids when you're annoyed, when you're busy doing something? You hate that you do it. It's a part of yourself you're not proud of. So when your kids say whatever or okay with that eye roll, are they holding up a mirror to your own behavior because you do it as well? Has she seen or have they seen you act in a similar way to your own parents or to your partner or someone else perhaps? Do they sometimes elicit the same response and feelings from you, and you're just old enough and hopefully mature enough with some self-awareness to not react in the same way, but you're feeling it, you're thinking it, you just might not act on it. But here's the thing, they still see it. They see it in your eyes, the subtle tensing of your lips, and your back straightening a little. And the sideways glance. It's time to consider that your explosion of anger isn't really directed at your kids. It's a reaction to seeing a reflection of a part of yourself that you deeply dislike or can't entirely control and hide. Or let's look at it through the third lens, the control switch. You've given a simple, reasonable instruction, and by rolling their eyes and saying, whatever, your teen is essentially refusing to comply with your instructions. And this makes you feel a complete lack of control over the situation. And for a parent, and for many parents, that's a deeply unsettling feeling. Your explosion of anger isn't really about the tone of voice. It's a raw reaction to that feeling of powerlessness. And of course, sometimes it's just that fourth reason. She knows that specific tone gets a rise out of you, and she's just poking the bear to see what happens because she can't be asked. And it's all for laughs, shits and giggles. It doesn't make it right, but you'll notice that slight sparkle in their eye and just the upturned tick of their mouth, those subtle signs. But it's what you do when you recognize these that really matters. So I'm going to give you a tool you can actually use. So your kid has said whatever with that eye roll, and you feel that hot wave of anger rising. You recognize that your button has been pushed. And in that moment, the first practical step I want you to take, the first step I want you to do is nothing. Not forever, but just for a bit. Before you say a word, I want you to take a deep breath and hold it. And as you hold it, I want you to count to 7 in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's not a made-up number. There is a real biological reason for it. And this is a true story. A technique I've used for years with students who have had some serious anger management issues. I've had a student whose impulse when he got angry was basically to smash another kid's head into the locker. And I told him, before you do anything, you have to take a deep breath and count to 7. But then I gave him a second step. I said, after you have paused and you've counted to 7 in your head, you have to ask yourself one question. And this is what I said to this kid, might not apply to you. Do I still feel like punching this kid? And I told him if the answer was yes, his only job was then to come and find me and we would go for a walk. No questions asked. And I have to tell you, he did find this helpful to control his temper. The initial explosion of anger you feel is just a physiological event. It's your brain's emotional center, the amygdala. It's being hijacked. It's flooded your body with adrenaline and cortisol, that classic fight or flight response. And here's the real science to back this up. There was a study done in 2012 on the emotional regulation in the journal Frontiers in Psychology. And they've shown that it takes a few seconds for our brain's logical side, the prefrontal cortex right up here, to catch up and regulate that initial emotional impulse. That 7-second pause is just enough time for those initial hormone levels to start to drop and allowing you to respond with slightly more clarity instead of just reacting. Okay, so you've taken your 7 seconds, you've held your breath, and the initial emotional storm is starting to pass just a little bit. Now you have a choice. And this is where our core philosophy for this entire podcast comes into play. Connection over correction. The correction path is to immediately punish that tone of voice, to say, don't you dare speak to me like that. And while that might feel justified, it just guarantees a fight and a shutdown. The connection path is to take a breath and consciously choose the relationship over the conflict. Again, this is a tool you can actually use. This is what you do next. I call it the reset. You lower your voice. You make sure your body language is relaxed, untense your shoulders, and you calmly ask again. You can say something like, okay, let's try that again. I can see you're in the middle of something and I was probably busy, stressed. I still need the rubbish taken out. Can you please do that for me? That's it. What you've done is incredibly powerful. You've de-escalated the situation. You haven't reacted to the eye roll, the whatever, the tone of voice. You've modeled emotional regulation for your kid and you've kept the focus on the actual task, not the attitude. You're teaching them that a moment of frustration doesn't have to blow up the entire interaction. You're choosing connection. And if after all that, however, the rubbish still doesn't get taken out, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to take another breath, maybe count to 7 again, control your tone, but you need to deepen it. And now you need to deepen it and put a now on the end. Can you please take the rubbish out now? That's it. Trust me, it works. Give it a go. That's the in-moment tool. But there's deeper long-term work that needs to be done. I've shown you how to stop the explosion. Now I'll tell you how to diffuse the bomb. And this one gets even more personal. This is all about the self-reflective work you can do to understand and lessen the power of your triggers over time. Because if I'm being realistic here, your kids are always going to push those buttons. but they're not controlling how you respond. You are. You need to be in control of your responses as the parents. There's 3 steps to this process, 3 conscious steps. Again, a tool you can actually use. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to become the observer. This is step 1. The first step is to identify the pattern. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. So I suggest parents keep a simple trigger journal for a week. Note it down. What was the behavior? What was my immediate feeling? What was my reaction on a scale of 1 to 10? How big was my reaction compared to the actual event? The simple act of observation helps you see your triggers with clarity instead of just being controlled by them. Again, you can't change what you don't acknowledge, so you need to acknowledge it. Step 2 is I want you to find the root of the problem. Once you see a pattern, the next step is actually to get curious. Ask yourself one powerful question. What does this really remind me of? Does it remind you of how your own parent made you feel? That's a ghost. Does it remind you of a part of yourself you don't like? That's the mirror. By naming the source of the trigger, you take away its mysterious power and you start to actually understand it. It's no longer just a random explosion. It's a specific, understandable echo from your past or a reflection of your present. The third thing I want you to do, the last thing, this is the final step, is I want you to create a new conscious thought to replace the old unconscious reaction. For each trigger, you can create a simple pattern interrupt phrase to say to yourself, especially after that 7-second pause. If the trigger is a ghost, your new internal script could be, this is my kid, it's not my father. Their intent is different. If it's a mirror, it could be, their mess is not my mess. Who cares? And that's a tough one to let go of as a mother. This isn't a magic fix, but it's the conscious practice of creating a new neural pathway. So let's bring it all together. In true teacher style, I'll recap what we have discussed today. First, we learned that a trigger isn't just about your teen's behavior. It's a disproportionate emotional reaction that often has deeper roots. We discovered those roots are usually one of 4 things. They're either a ghost from your past or an echo of your upbringing, mirror of yourself, which is a trait you don't particularly like about yourself, a control switch, a reaction to feeling a loss of power, or it could be just them poking the bear. Second, we learned that the most powerful thing to do in that heated moment is the 7-second pause. This allows you to choose my core philosophy, connection over correction. And finally, we talked about the deeper long-term work using a trigger journal and asking, what does this really remind me of? To find the root of the trigger and then consciously writing a new internal script to interrupt that old automatic reaction. It's not about being a perfect parent who never gets angry. It's about becoming a more aware parent who understands that when your buttons get pushed, it's often an invitation to look within. I've currently got a course on all this in my school community. So if you need a little help working through this or you want some more guidance from me in a more one-on-one kind of forum, then you need to reach out to me via social media and join my school community. I'll pop a link in the comment section as well. This whole idea of looking beneath our own reactions makes me think of one of my favorite Sir Ken Robinson stories. I'm bringing him back this season because he's a good one. It's about a young girl in the 1930s named Gillian Ling. She was a terrible student. She couldn't sit still and she was constantly fidgeting, and her teachers thought she had a learning disorder. So her mother, being the caring parent she was, took her to the doctor. And then after listening to all her problems, the doctor simply turned on the radio and walked out of the room. As soon as he and her mother were gone, Jillian got up and started moving beautifully to the music. She started dancing. The doctor turned to her mother and said, "Mrs. Lynn, Jillian isn't sick. She's a dancer." And I think this is the perfect metaphor for our triggers. Our teens' behaviour, that eye roll, that whatever, it's just the fidgeting. A triggered reaction is when we as parents see the fidgeting and immediately try to put a label on it as a problem to be corrected, just like Jillian's teachers did. But what if, like that wise doctor, we got curious about the dance? What if we looked at our own explosive reaction, that hot wave of anger, and asked, what is this dance? What old story is in this choreography? What is it trying to tell me? And then when we do that, we stop being the behaviour police for our kids and start becoming observers of our inner world. Next time on Talking Teens, we're going one layer deeper. We've just talked about our own triggers, but where do they actually come from? What if these things you automatically find yourself saying to your teen, the old sayings, money doesn't grow on trees, you're just too sensitive, and that's not a realistic dream. You better have a backup plan, are just echoes of what your own parents said to you. What if, without realising it, we are passing down that very same limiting belief that held us back? Join me as we explore the ghosts of our own upbringing and learn how to break the cycle. If you enjoyed this episode and want to continue the conversation, please follow and subscribe on YouTube and on all my social media channels of Talking Teens Official. And if you find real value in what I'm doing here, please consider buying me a coffee. I'll put a QR code in the comments and the show notes, and you can donate any amount you choose, and every little bit helps fuel my late night coffee supply while I'm editing these episodes for you. Last but not least, please don't forget to join my school community. There are some great conversations that are going on in there, and I would love for you to come and take a look. Until then, remember that focus, connection, overcorrection. Thank you for listening. I'm Nural, and this is Talking Teens Official.